"You don't belong here." Araminta's venomous snarl slices through the Charleston reunion, her silver scissors savaging Zola's cornrows, golden threads spilling like fractured vows across the Devington mansion's gleaming floor. The stunned clan gapes as Zola's Gullah heritage is shredded, her pride bleeding under the chandelier's taunting glare. Rain lashes the windows, amplifying the moment's fury. Will Zola shatter beneath this cruel assault or forge defiance from her pain? In 30 minutes, a seismic truth about her identity will mute the Devington dynasty, their arrogance crumbling in a tempest of revelation. What will this fierce black woman unleash next? Can her roots withstand such a blade? Dive into her saga of vengeance and redemption. The Devington mansion loomed over Charleston's battery, its white columns gleaming under a bruised, rain-heavy sky, a monument to old Southern wealth that seemed to whisper Zola didn't belong. Inside, the kitchen pulsed with the earthy warmth of her grandmother's Gullah gumbo, shrimp and okra simmering in a cast-iron pot, the scent weaving through the sterile elegance of polished oak and crystal chandeliers. Zola, 27, moved with a dancer's grace, her cornrows adorned with golden threads glinting like low-country fireflies, each twist a defiant hymn to her heritage. Her apron, dusted with cornmeal, clung to her sweat-damp skin as she stirred, the rhythmic clink of threads a quiet rebellion against the mansion's cold grandeur. She glanced at her phone, Reese's message glowing. "You're my light, Zola. Shine today." Her heart clenched. He was stuck in Savannah, a business deal snaring him, leaving her to face his family alone. The Devington reunion, a showcase of lineage and pride, felt like a battlefield, and Zola was armed only with her recipes and resolve. She'd spent months blending Gullah dishes with Devington staples, hoping to stitch herself into their tapestry. Her fingers traced a golden thread in her hair, a memory flickering, her grandmother's hands weaving stories of sea islands, of roots no storm could uproot. "Hold fast, child," her grandmother's voice echoed, grounding her as rain tapped the windows like a warning drum. Voices spilled from the foyer, sharp and foreign, as early guests arrived, their laughter slicing through the kitchen's warmth. Zola smoothed her apron, her pulse quickening. She'd faced the Devingtons' veiled slights before. 2 years of marriage, countless dinners where her dishes were exotic, but never enough. They were old money, their wealth spun from cotton and shipping, and to Araminta, Reese's mother, Zola was a flaw in their flawless legacy, a black woman with no pedigree to match their name. The kitchen door swung open, and Araminta's heels clicked like a metronome on the hardwood. Her ash-blonde chignon was severe, her lavender perfume a cloying invasion. She paused, green eyes raking over the platters of cornbread and collards with a curled lip. "These dishes are ambitious," she said, her voice silk-wrapped steel. "Perhaps too much for our guests, Zola." Her gaze snagged on Zola's cornrows, the golden threads catching the light like defiant stars. "And that hair," she added, her tone icing over. "It's a statement, dear. Devington events demand restraint." Zola's fingers tightened on the wooden spoon, her smile practiced but brittle. "I thought I'd honor Charleston's roots, Araminta," she said, her voice steady despite the sting. "My family's Gullah traditions belong here too." Araminta's lips thinned, a flicker of disdain crossing her face. "This is our legacy, not yours," she said, her words a blade aimed at Zola's core. She turned, heels retreating, leaving a chill that lingered like the rain outside. Zola exhaled, her heart thudding. She checked the gumbo, its aroma a hug from her grandmother's kitchen, a tether to her strength. She wasn't here to shrink. The front door chimed, more guests flooding the foyer, their voices a stark contrast to the kitchen's solitude. Carrying a tray of sweet tea, Zola stepped into the dining hall, where chandeliers cast golden fractures across mahogany. Her cornrows swayed, a vibrant defiance against the pastel dresses and tailored suits. Elise, Reese's cousin, took a glass, her smile tentative. "This smells incredible, Zola," she said, but her eyes darted to the doorway where Araminta's shadow loomed and her warmth faltered. Zola's heart sank, but she pressed on, offering tea to an uncle with a gray mustache. He grunted. "Nice spread," his gaze lingering on her hair before sliding away, a mirror of Araminta's judgment. Cora, Reese's aunt, hovered near the buffet, her kind eyes clouded with hesitation. "You've worked hard, child," she murmured, but her voice dropped as Araminta's heels echoed closer. Even kindness here was fragile, caged by Araminta's presence. Zola returned to the kitchen, her phone silent. No new word from Reese. The ache of his absence grew, but she whispered, "Just get through today." Her fingers brushed her cornrows, the golden threads clicking softly, a prayer to her ancestors' strength. The rain thickened, its rhythm a steady drum against the mansion's roof, urging her to hold fast. But Araminta's words, "Our legacy, not yours," clung like damp air, a warning of the storm brewing. This wasn't just a reunion, it was a proving ground, and Zola's only shield was the love she carried for Reese and the heritage woven into every golden thread. Zola's heart still thrummed with the sting of Araminta's words, "Our legacy, not yours," as she carried a tray of collards into the dining hall, where the Devington reunion pulsed with forced civility. The chandelier's golden light fractured across mahogany, casting shadows over pastel dresses and starched collars, a sea of guarded eyes that flickered to her cornrows, their golden threads glinting defiantly. Rain battered the windows, a relentless drum urging her to stand tall. She set the tray down, her fingers grazing the threads, her grandmother's voice whispering, "Hold fast, child." But the air was thick, charged with whispers that pricked like thorns, and Araminta's lavender scent lingered, a predator's trail circling closer. The hall buzzed as guests settled, their chatter a veneer over the tension Zola felt in her bones. She moved silently, refilling glasses, her apron a thin shield against their stares. Elise, Reese's cousin, hovered near the buffet, her earlier warmth now a hesitant glance. "These collards are perfect," she murmured, but her eyes darted to Araminta, who stood at the table's head, her ash-blonde chignon a crown of control. Zola nodded, her smile tight, the weight of Araminta's disdain pressing harder. Cora, Reese's aunt, offered a fleeting look of sympathy, but her silence spoke louder, a cage of complicity that trapped Zola's hope. Araminta raised a crystal glass, her voice ringing out. "To Devington heritage," she declared, her green eyes sweeping the room, landing on Zola like a blade. "We honor tradition, not distractions." The words were a dart, cloaked in elegance, and the room stilled, glasses pausing midair. Zola's pulse roared, but she kept her chin high, her cornrows swaying like a banner of her Gullah pride. "You can't erase me," she thought, her grandmother's strength afire in her chest. A guest emboldened by wine called out, "Zola, tell us about these dishes." The question was a crack in the wall, and she seized it, her voice soft but clear. "My grandmother was Gullah, born on the islands. These recipes, collards, gumbo, are her stories, our history." The room leaned in, some nodding, Elise's eyes softening. Even the gray-mustached uncle grunted approval. For a moment, Zola felt the bridge she'd dreamed of building, her heritage weaving into theirs. But Araminta's glass clinked sharply against the table, shattering the warmth. "Enough," she snapped, her smile ablaze. "We're here for our history." The dismissal was a whip, snapping the room back to her command. Zola's chest tightened, her moment snuffed out, but she held her ground, her cornrows a heavy crown under the chandelier's glare. Araminta's voice rose again, saccharine and sharp. "The ribbon-cutting ceremony, a Devington tradition, binds our legacy. Zola, you'll assist." Her eyes glinted with something darker than triumph, a trap woven into her words. Zola nodded, her throat tight, sensing the danger but bound by duty to Reese, to the life they'd built. She stepped forward, clutching the crimson ribbon, its silk cool against her palms. The clan watched, their murmurs a low hum, oblivious to the storm gathering in Araminta's gaze. Elise shifted uncomfortably, Cora's brow furrowing, but neither spoke. The rain's rhythm intensified, a heartbeat urging Zola to brace herself. "Hold it taut, dear," Araminta said, her voice dripping venom as she raised the silver scissors, their heirloom blades flashing under the light. "This ribbon seals our pride," she began, her words for the crowd, but her eyes locked on Zola, a silent accusation. You don't belong. Zola met her gaze, her voice steady. Unity is beautiful, Araminta. I'm honored to be part. The words, laced with grace, were a spark in the tinder of Araminta's resentment. A guest murmured approval, Elise's lips curving, but Araminta's face contorted, her control fraying like a taut thread. In a swift, venomous motion, Araminta lunged, not at the ribbon, but at Zola's cornrows. The scissors sliced, a sickening snip echoing as a thick L braid fell, golden threads clattering to the oak floor like shattered dreams. This is a Devington event, not your stage, Araminta hissed, her voice raw with triumph. The room froze. The rain's roar the only sound, amplifying the violation. Zola stood motionless, her hand clutching the fallen braid, its threads digging into her palm. Her eyes burned, not with tears, but with a haunting defiance, a fire that refused to die. The pain was a tidal wave. Her hair, her grandmother's legacy, torn away before this gilded crowd. Elise covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Cora shook her head, her silence a heavier betrayal than Araminta's act. The clan gaped, their glasses forgotten, but none spoke, their complicity a suffocating weight. Araminta sat, her smirk gleaming, the scissors glinting in her hand, believing she'd broken Zola. But Zola bent slowly, picking up another braid, its golden threads catching the light like defiant stars. Her movements were deliberate, a silent vow. You won't erase me. Her eyes met Araminta's, burning with a strength that made the matriarch's smirk falter. The room held its breath, the chandelier's light flickering, as if bowing to Zola's resolve, as the storm outside roared on, promising a reckoning yet to come. The echo of golden threads clattering to the oak floor still haunted Zola as she stood by the dining hall's buffet, the severed braid clutched in her trembling hand. 30 minutes had passed since Araminta's scissors carved through her cornrows, and the Devington reunion churned on, its forced gaiety a cruel mockery of her pain. Rain lashed the windows, a relentless roar that mirrored the storm in her chest. The chandelier's light flickered, casting jagged shadows over the clan's pastel dresses and tailored suits, their eyes sliding past her like she was a ghost. Zola's heart pounded, her shorn hair a raw wound, but her gaze burned with a fire no blade could douse. You won't erase me, she vowed, her grandmother's voice a whisper in her soul. Hold fast, child. She forced her hands steady, arranging a platter of gumbo, its earthy warmth a fading tether to her Gullah roots. The clan's murmurs buzzed like wasps, their glances sharp but fleeting, as if her pain was a stain they couldn't bear to see. Elise, Reese's cousin, lingered near the table, her fingers twisting a napkin, her earlier warmth now a shadowed guilt. Zola, she started, but her voice faltered under Araminta's distant glare. The matriarch seated at the hall's head, her smirk a silent crown. Zola nodded, her smile a brittle mask. It's okay, Elise, she lied, her voice soft but steady, the braid in her hand a lifeline to her pride. Cora, Reese's aunt, approached, her kind eyes clouded with remorse. You didn't deserve that, child, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the clink of glasses. But she stepped back as Araminta's lavender scent drifted closer, a reminder of her unchallenged reign. Zola's chest tightened, the clan's silence a heavier blow than the scissors' snip. She moved to refill a tray of sweet tea, her shorn hair brushing her shoulders, each missing thread a pulse of loss. The rain's rhythm urged her to endure, but the weight of their stares pressed like a tide, threatening to drown her resolve. A guest, an uncle with a gray mustache, took a glass, his gaze lingering on her cropped hair before muttering, "Shame about the display." The words were a needle, piercing her armor, but Zola's jaw clenched, her response a quiet fire. "It's my heritage, not a display," she said, her eyes locking with his until he looked away. The room's hum faltered, a few heads turning, but Araminta's voice cut through, sharp and commanding. "Zola, more ice for the guests. Don't dawdle." The order was a public lash, a reminder of her place, and the clan complied, their silence a cage. Zola retreated to the kitchen, the gumbo's aroma wrapping around her like a hug. But even that couldn't soothe the ache. Her phone lay silent, No word from Reese, his absence a hollow wound. She leaned against the counter, the braid in her hand glinting under the dim light, its golden threads a defiant constellation. She closed her eyes, her grandmother's voice rising through the fog of pain. Your hair is your story, child. No one can steal that. Zola's fingers tightened, the threads digging into her palm, grounding her. She wasn't broken, not yet, but the kitchen, once a sanctuary, felt like a shrinking cell, its warmth no match for the chill of Araminta's triumph. The dining hall's chatter filtered through the door, a stark contrast to her solitude. Zola tied her shorn hair back, the remaining threads clicking softly, a prayer to her ancestors' strength. She whispered, I'm still here, her voice a vow against the violation. The rain's roar softened, but the storm within her burned brighter, fueled by the heritage Araminta had tried to sever. She stepped back into the hall, tray in hand, her eyes scanning the crowd. Elise watched her, guilt etched in her face, while Cora's lips trembled, as if on the verge of speaking. But Araminta's presence loomed, her smirk a silent dare, her scissors now displayed on the table, a gleaming relic of her cruelty. A cousin, emboldened by wine, leaned toward Elise, his whisper carrying, She doesn't fit, does she? Elise's eyes flicked to Zola, a flicker of defiance breaking through. Maybe we're the ones who don't, she murmured, her voice barely audible. The words were a spark, a crack in the clan's complicity, but they couldn't erase the weight of Zola's loss. Her phone buzzed, a text from Reese. Delayed again. You okay, love? Her fingers hovered, wanting to confess the wound, but she typed, holding on. Hurry. She couldn't burden him, not now. The rain's rhythm pulsed, a heartbeat urging her to endure. Zola's gaze fell on the scissors, their silver edges a taunting reminder. The ceremony was over, but the violation lingered, a scar on her soul. She clutched the braid tighter, its golden threads a beacon in the dim hall. Araminta's eyes met hers, sharp and unyielding, but Zola stood taller, her shorn hair framing a face alight with purpose. The clan's whispers grew, their glances heavier, as if sensing a shift. The air thickened, the chandelier's light wavering, and Zola knew this moment was a precipice. 30 minutes had carved a wound, but the next would bring a reckoning, a truth she couldn't yet name. Zola's whispered vow, I'm still here, still burned in her chest as she stood by the dining hall's buffet, the severed braid in her hand, a pulsing reminder of her Gullah roots. The Devington reunion droned on, its chatter a hollow hum beneath the rain's fading roar, but the air crackled with an unspoken shift, as if the chandelier's light sensed a storm breaking. Zola's shorn hair framed her face, its golden threads glinting like embers, her eyes fixed on the crowd, daring them to see her. Araminta sat at the table's head, her smirk a fragile mask, the silver scissors gleaming beside her like a trophy of her cruelty. Elise's guilty glance lingered, Cora's lips trembling with unsaid words, but the clan's silence held, a suffocating weight. The dining hall doors burst open, a gust of damp air slicing through the room's haze. Every head turned as Malcolm and Lena Vanguard strode in, their rain-soaked coats dripping onto the polished floor, their presence a thunderclap that stilled the clinking glasses. Malcolm, tall and broad-shouldered, his graying hair cropped close, carried an air of unyielding authority, his dark eyes sweeping the room with quiet fury. Lena beside him was a vision of grace, her cornrows adorned with golden threads mirroring Zola's lost braids, her face etched with a mother's unspoken grief. The clan froze, their murmurs snuffed out, as Araminta's smirk faltered, her hands gripping the table's edge. Who are you? Araminta demanded, her voice shrill, a crack in her polished veneer. This is a private Devington event. But her words trembled, her green eyes darting as Malcolm's gaze locked on Zola, softening with a warmth that pierced her heart. We're here for our daughter, he said, his voice a low, unyielding current that silenced the room. Zola's breath caught, the braid in her hand suddenly heavy, its golden threads a bridge to a past she couldn't grasp. Lena stepped closer, her silk dress rustling, her eyes brimming with tears as they met Zola's. "My baby," she whispered, her voice breaking, a single tear tracing her cheek. The room spun, the chandelier's light fracturing into a kaleidoscope of gold. Zola's knees trembled, her fingers tightening around the braid, a memory flickering, gentle hands weaving her hair, laughter under a low-country sky. I I don't understand," she stammered, her voice raw, her eyes searching Lena's face, so like her own, yet carved with years of loss. Malcolm's deep voice cut through the haze. "Zola, you're our daughter lost to us for 20 years." His words were a beacon, piercing the fog of her amnesia. "A car accident when you were 7 stole you from us," he said, his tone steady but searing. "We never stopped searching." Araminta lurched to her feet, her chair scraping the oak floor. "This is absurd," she snapped, her voice a desperate claw at control. "She's my son's wife, nothing more." But her knuckles whitened, her authority fraying, as the clan's eyes shifted to the vanguards, whose poise dwarfed the Devington's fading grandeur. Elise whispered to Cora, her voice barely audible. "Could it be true?" Cora's nod was subtle, her gaze on Zola softening with guilt. The room's murmurs grew, a tide turning against Araminta's reign. Lena stepped closer, her golden-threaded braids catching the light like a mirror to Zola's loss. "These braids were our bond," she said, her voice thick with love, her fingers trembling as they brushed Zola's shorn hair. "I taught you to weave them, stories in every knot, our Gullah strength, our history." Zola's heart lurched, a spark of recognition flaring despite the void. She saw it, a porch swing, a woman's hands, the scent of jasmine. It was faint, like a star behind clouds, but it was hers. "I remember something," she whispered, her eyes locked on Lena's, searching for truth. Malcolm's gaze swept the room, a challenge to the Devington's pride. "You attacked our daughter's heritage," he said, his tone even but cutting, pinning Araminta like a specimen. "Her braids carried our legacy, and you tried to cut it away." The words were a gavel, and the clans shifted, their loyalty fracturing. Elise's eyes widened, a flicker of respect breaking through her guilt. Cora murmured, "We've been blind," her voice low but clear, a rebuke to Araminta's cruelty. Araminta's face drained of color, her hands trembling as she clutched the table. "You expect us to believe this charade?" she demanded, but her voice cracked, her control slipping like sand. The vanguard stood unmoved, their presence a fortress. Zola's braid felt lighter in her hand, its golden threads a lifeline to a past rushing toward her. The rain softened to a murmur, but the dining hall's air thickened, charged with a truth that threatened to shatter the Devington dynasty. Zola stood taller, her shorn hair a badge of survival, her eyes burning with a question she wasn't ready to voice. The clan watched, breathless, as the doors creaked again, footsteps echoing in the foyer, heavy and deliberate, promising a storm that would upend this house of pride. The footsteps in the foyer faded, but their echo lingered like a heartbeat in Zola's chest. Malcolm's words, "Zola, you're our daughter," still ringing as she stood frozen, the severed braid in her hand pulsing with golden threads. The dining hall's air was thick, the chandelier's light wavering as if bowing to the truth unfolding. Lena's tear-streaked face, framed by cornrows mirroring Zola's lost ones, held her gaze, a mother's love piercing the fog of her amnesia. Araminta's shrill protest hung unanswered, her authority crumbling as the Devington clan watched, their glasses forgotten, their murmurs silenced by the vanguard's unyielding presence. Zola's knees trembled, but her eyes burned with a question she couldn't yet voice, her heart teetering on the edge of a past reclaimed. Malcolm stepped forward, his broad frame a fortress, his voice steady but laced with grief. 20 years ago, a car accident stole you from us, Zola, he said, his dark eyes locking onto hers. You were 7, playing near the low country marshes. A drunk driver hit our car, and you vanished in the chaos. Taken to a hospital, then lost to foster care. Amnesia buried your memories, but we never stopped searching. His words carved through the room, each one a stone in the Devington's crumbling pride. Zola's breath hitched, the braid in her hand a sudden weight, its golden threads glinting like fragments of a life she couldn't grasp. Lena's silk dress rustled as she closed the distance, her fingers trembling as they touched Zola's shorn hair. "These braids were our ritual," she whispered, her voice thick with love. "Every summer on our porch, I'd weave your hair, threading gold for our Gullah ancestors, stories of strength, of sea islands, of home." Zola's heart lurched, a memory flaring. A woman's hands, gentle and sure, knotting her hair under a jasmine-scented sky, laughter weaving through the breeze. It was faint, like a tide pulling back, but it was hers. "I see it," she stammered, her voice raw, tears pricking her eyes. "A porch. Your hands. I remember." Araminta lurched to her feet, her chair screeching against the oak floor. "This is a farce," she snapped, her voice a desperate claw at control. "She's my son's wife, a nobody." But her words faltered, her ash-blonde chignon unraveling, her green eyes darting as the clan's gazes shifted. "Elise," Reese's cousin, whispered to Cora, her voice trembling. "She looks like Lena. It's true, isn't it?" Cora's nod was slow, her eyes heavy with guilt. "We've been cruel," she murmured, her voice a quiet rebuke. The room's murmurs swelled, a tide of doubt eroding Araminta's reign. Malcolm's gaze never wavered, pinning Araminta like a blade. "You attacked our daughter's heritage," he said, his tone even but searing. "Her braids carried our legacy, vanguard legacy, built on Atlanta's skyline, on integrity, not prejudice. You thought you could erase her." The words were a thunderclap, and the clan flinched, their loyalty fracturing. Elise's eyes widened, a spark of respect breaking through her guilt. Cora's hands trembled, her earlier silence now a weight she couldn't bear. A cousin muttered, "We didn't know," his voice hollow, as if the truth had stripped their pride bare. Zola's fingers tightened around the braid, its golden threads a lifeline to the past Lena's words had unlocked. She saw more now, a child running through marshes, a mother's laughter, a father's steady hand. The memories were shards, jagged and incomplete, but they were hers, stitching her to the vanguards. "I don't know everything," she said, her voice a whisper yet caring, her eyes locked on Lena's. "But I feel you. I feel home." Lena's tearful smile was a balm, her hand cupping Zola's cheek, the touch a bridge across 20 years. Araminta's face drained of color, her hands clawing the table as she stammered, "You can't take my family." But her voice was a ghost, her authority dissolving under the vanguard's stature. The clan's whispers grew, some turning away, their eyes avoiding Araminta's. Elise stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "You went too far, Araminta," she said, her guilt giving way to resolve. Cora nodded, her voice breaking. "She's more than we deserved, and we failed her." The words were a crack in the Devington facade, a spark of change in a house of pride. Zola stood taller, her shorn hair framing a face alight with purpose. The braid in her hand felt lighter, its golden threads a promise of stories yet to be woven. The chandelier's light steadied, as if honoring her truth. Malcolm's eyes softened, a father's pride breaking through his fury. "You're not alone anymore, Zola," he said, his voice a vow. Lena's hand lingered, her golden threaded braids a mirror to Zola's loss, a pledge to rebuild. The rain outside softened to a hush, but the dining hall pulsed with a new storm. A truth that shook the Devington's foundations, threatening to topple their legacy. Zola's heart raced, her gaze shifting to the foyer, where the echo of footsteps promised more, a reckoning that would rewrite her story. Zola's whispered, "I feel home," still echoed in her heart. The severed braid in her hand, a golden threaded anchor to the vanguard's truth. The dining hall pulsed with a charged silence, the chandelier's light flickering as if straining under the weight of revelation. Malcolm and Lena stood resolute, their presence a fortress against the Devington clan's crumbling pride. Araminta's trembling hands clutched the table, her ash-blonde chignon unraveling, her green eyes darting like a cornered animal's. The clan's murmurs swelled, a tide of doubt washing over their once unshakable loyalty. Zola stood taller, her shorn hair framing a face alight with purpose, the rain outside softening to a murmur, as if the low country itself held its breath for the reckoning unfolding. Malcolm's voice cut through the haze, steady and searing. The vanguards built an empire on integrity. Atlanta's skyline, schools, communities, he said, his dark eyes pinning Araminta. Your family's wealth, built on cotton and control, pales in comparison. You attacked our daughter's heritage, thinking it made her small. You were wrong. His words were a gavel, striking the Devington legacy. A cousin, his face flushed from wine, shifted uncomfortably, his earlier condescension gone. Elise, Reese's cousin, leaned toward Cora, her whisper sharp with guilt. We let this happen, she said, her eyes on Zola, now brimming with respect. Cora's hands trembled, her voice low but firm. Araminta, you've shamed us all. Araminta's face paled, her knuckles whitening as she gripped the table. You can't rewrite our history, she snapped, but her voice cracked, a hollow echo in the hall. The clan's eyes turned from her, their silence a betrayal sharper than words. A distant uncle muttered, We didn't know she was a vanguard, his tone laced with fear, as if the name carried a weight they couldn't bear. Malcolm's gaze swept the room, unyielding. You didn't know because you didn't see her, he said. You saw her hair, her skin, and judged. That's your failure, not hers. The clan flinched, their glasses forgotten, their pride unraveling like a frayed tapestry. Zola's heart raced, the braid in her hand lighter now, its golden threads a testament to the heritage Araminta had tried to erase. She felt Lena's touch on her shoulder, a mother's warmth grounding her, and Malcolm's steady gaze, a father's promise. The memories, porch swings, jasmine, braided stories, flickered brighter, stitching her to a past she was ready to claim. I'm not your nobody, she said, her voice soft but cutting, aimed at Araminta. I'm Zola Vanguard, and my roots are deeper than your hate. The declaration was a thunderclap, silencing the murmurs. Elise's eyes widened, a nod of respect, while Cora's lips curved, her guilt giving way to admiration. Araminta slumped, her hands shaking, the silver scissors on the table a forgotten relic of her failed crusade. This is my family, she whispered, but the words were hollow, her authority a ghost. The clan's whispers turned to accusations, a cousin hissing, You've cost us everything. Another guest, a woman in a pastel dress, murmured, The vanguards, they're untouchable. The room's air thickened, the chandelier's light dimming as if mourning the Devington legacy. Malcolm stepped closer to Zola, his voice low but resolute. We've offered a partnership with your family, Araminta, but not after this. Your prejudice has burned that bridge. The words were final, a financial and moral blow that left the clan reeling. Elise stood, her voice trembling but clear. Zola, we were wrong, she said, her eyes meeting Zola's. I should have spoken up. I'm sorry. The apology was raw, a crack in the Devington armor, and Cora nodded, her voice breaking. You're more family than we've been, child. We've got learning to do. The clan's murmurs softened, some heads bowing, their complicity laid bare. Zola's eyes stung, not with tears, but with a fierce resolve. She clutched the braid, its golden threads a pulse of strength, her grandmother's voice whispering, Your story lives, child. She wasn't alone anymore. The vanguard's presence was a shield, their legacy a fire that warmed her soul. The dining hall doors creaked, and a new figure burst through, rain-soaked and breathless. Reese's voice shattered the silence, raw with horror. Mother, what have you done? He demanded, his eyes locking on Zola's shorn hair, his tailored coat dripping onto the floor. Araminta stammered, I was protecting our name. But Reese ignored her, rushing to Zola, his hands framing her face. I'm so sorry, love, he whispered, his voice breaking, his thumb brushing her cheek. Zola leaned into his touch, the ache of his absence easing, her braid still clutched as a testament to her survival. I'm still here, Reese, she said, her voice steady, her eyes burning with purpose. Reese turned to the clan, his gaze fierce. Zola's my wife, and she's more Devington than any of you, he said, his words a gauntlet thrown at Araminta's feet. The clan shifted, their silence a reckoning, their eyes darting between Zola and the vanguards. Lena's hand tightened on Zola's shoulder, her voice warm but firm. "We'd like to host a gathering. Bring our families together," she said, her eyes sweeping the room. "There's room for change if you're willing." The offer hung, a challenge to the Devington pride, and Elise nodded, her guilt replaced by resolve. The rain outside hushed, but the storm within Zola burned brighter, her identity a flame no blade could extinguish, ready to reshape this house of fractured legacies. Reese's touch still warmed Zola's cheek, his anguished whisper, "I'm so sorry, love," a lifeline anchoring her to the dining hall's charged silence. The vanguard stood beside her, Malcolm's commanding presence and Lena's golden-threaded braids a mirror to her own, their offer of a new gathering hanging like a challenge to the Devington clan's fractured pride. Araminta slumped at the table's head, her trembling hands a faint shadow of her former reign, the silver scissors beside her a mocking relic. The chandelier's light flickered, as if recoiling from the truth that had shattered the reunion's facade. Zola clutched her severed braid, its golden threads pulsing with her Gullah heritage, her heart alight with a fire that no blade could snuff out. The clan sat frozen, their glasses abandoned, their eyes darting between Zola and the vanguards, unable to meet the weight of their own complicity. Elise's apology lingered in the air, Cora's remorse a quiet echo, but now the room held its breath, the rain outside a hushed murmur, as if Charleston itself awaited Zola's next move. Reese's grip tightened, his voice raw with fury as he faced his mother. "You tried to break her, Mother," he said, his words slicing through the silence. "You cut her hair, her heritage to protect your name. But Zola's more family than you've ever been." Araminta's face drained to ash, her lips parting, but no words came. Her green eyes, once sharp with control, now flickered with panic, her chignon unraveling like her authority. I was safeguarding our legacy," she stammered, her voice a brittle thread. But the clan's silence was a guillotine, their gazes turning from her to Zola. A cousin in a tailored suit shifted, his earlier whispers of doubt now a heavy stillness. Another guest, a woman in pastel, murmured, "We were wrong," her voice barely audible, a crack in the Devington armor. Zola stepped forward, her shorn hair framing a face carved with purpose, the braid in her hand a banner of survival. "You thought you could cut me down, Araminta," she said, her voice steady, ringing through the hall like a bell. "But my roots, Gullah roots, Vanguard roots, are stronger than your hate. I'm Zola Vanguard, and I belong here, not as your son's wife, but as me." The declaration was a thunderclap, silencing the last of the clan's murmurs. Elise's eyes glistened, a nod of respect breaking through her guilt. Cora's hands clasped tightly, her voice soft but clear. "You've shown us what family means, child." The clan's silence deepened, a collective surrender to the truth. A distant uncle, his gray mustache twitching, looked away, his earlier condescension buried under shame. Another guest whispered, "She's a vanguard," the name carrying a weight that dwarfed the Devington's fading grandeur. Araminta's hands trembled, the scissors untouched, her eyes darting as if seeking an ally. But none remained. The chandelier's light dimmed, as if bowing to Zola's triumph, its golden glow catching the threads in her hand, like stars reborn. Malcolm's voice broke the hush, steady and resolute. "Your family's legacy is built on exclusion," he said, his gaze sweeping the clan. "Ours thrives on strength, like Zola's. You've lost more than a partnership today." The words were a final blow, and the clan flinched, their silence a confession. Lena's hand rested on Zola's shoulder, her golden-threaded braids a promise of stories yet to weave. "You're our light, Zola," she said, her voice thick with love. "No one can dim that." Zola's eyes stung, her heart swelling with a warmth she hadn't known she'd lost. The braid in her hand lighter now, a symbol of endurance. Reese turned to Zola, his eyes fierce with love. "I failed you by being late," he said, his voice breaking. "But I'm here now, and we'll face this together." Zola leaned into him, her voice soft but unyielding. "You're here, Reese. That's enough." The clan watched, their silence a mirror to their shame, as Elise stood again, her voice stronger. We need to change, she said, her eyes on Zola. You've shown us how. Cora nodded, her remorse now a vow. It's time, Araminta. We've been blind too long. Araminta slumped further, her hands covering her face, her voice a whisper. You can't take my family. But the words were hollow, her reign shattered. The clan's eyes avoided her, their loyalty gone, replaced by a dawning respect for Zola. The dining hall's air lightened, the rain outside a gentle cadence, as if Charleston exhaled. Zola's braid gleamed in her hand, its golden threads a testament to her survival. She looked at Lena, then Reese, her heart a flame of purpose. The Vanguard's offer lingered, a gathering to bridge families, a chance to rewrite this house's story. Zola's gaze shifted to the doors, where the echo of footsteps had faded, but a new promise stirred, a future where her truth would burn brighter than any prejudice. Zola's declaration, "I'm Zola Vanguard, and I belong here," still echoed as she stood in the dining hall, Reese's hand warm in hers, the Vanguard's a steadfast shield beside her. The chandelier's light steadied, bathing her shorn hair in a golden glow, its remaining threads glinting like embers of her Gullah pride. Lena's offer of a new gathering lingered, a bridge to a future untainted by prejudice, while Araminta sat alone, her silhouette a fading shadow against the table, her silver scissors abandoned. The Devington clan's silence was a confession, their eyes no longer avoiding Zola, but seeking her, as if seeing her for the first time. The rain outside had hushed, Charleston's air clearing, as if the low country exhaled for her triumph. Zola stepped onto the veranda, the cool dusk wrapping around her like a balm. The sunset painted the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks, catching her shorn hair. Now a badge of survival, not shame. Reese stood beside her, his grip firm, his eyes fierce with love. "You're stronger than I ever knew," he said, his voice thick with guilt. "I should have been here sooner." Zola shook her head, squeezing his hand. "You're here now, Reese, that's enough." Her braid, clutched tightly, felt lighter, its golden threads a testament to her endurance. Lena joined them, her cornrows gleaming, a mirror to the legacy Zola was reclaiming. She held a single golden thread, its shimmer a promise. "We'll weave new stories, Zola," she said, her voice warm, "like we did under Atlanta's sun." Zola's throat tightened, a memory flickering, jasmine-scented nights, a porch swing, her mother's hands knotting her hair with love. "I'd like that." "Mom," she whispered, the word a tentative bridge to a past reborn. Lena's eyes glistened, her smile a beacon through 20 years of loss. Malcolm stepped forward, his broad frame a quiet strength. "You're our daughter always," he said, his voice steady. "No blade can cut that away." Zola nodded, her heart swelling, the braid in her hand a pulse of belonging. The veranda's boards creaked under their weight, a rhythm like the heartbeat of a new beginning. Elise followed, her steps hesitant, her eyes shadowed with remorse. "Zola, I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I should have stood up when Araminta. I was wrong." Her apology was raw, a crack in the Devington facade. Zola met her gaze, her voice kind but firm. "It's a start, Elise. That matters." Cora joined them, her wiry frame softened by guilt. "You've taught us what family means, child," she said, her eyes warm. "We've got work to do." Their words were seeds, fragile but hopeful, planted in the ruins of Araminta's prejudice. Malcolm's gaze swept the group, his voice a call to change. "We'll host a gathering in Atlanta," he said, his tone resolute. "A chance to build something better. For Zola, for all of us." Reese nodded, his jaw set. "My family needs this," he said, his hand tightening on Zola's. "I'll make sure we're there, Mr. Vanguard." The promise hung in the air, a vow to bridge the chasm Araminta's cruelty had carved. Elise's faint smile echoed its hope, Cora murmuring, "It's time." The sunset's glow deepened, as if blessing their resolve. Through the dining hall's windows, Araminta's silhouette remained, seated alone, her head bowed, the scissors a relic of her failed crusade. The clan's whispers, now of change, drifted out, leaving her in shadow. Zola felt no pity, only clarity. Araminta's attempt to erase her had forged something stronger. She turned to the horizon, her decision clear. She'd stay with Reese, their love a foundation, but she'd also reclaim her vanguard heritage, starting with Atlanta, where stories waited to be woven. "I'm ready to know who I am," she said, her voice a quiet vow, and Lena's tearful nod was a mother's blessing. Malcolm's eyes met hers, a father's pride. "You're already her, Zola," he said, his voice warm. "The rest is just catching up." The veranda swelled with the clan's tentative voices, some stepping out, their faces open, drawn to the light of change. Elise murmured to a cousin, "She's a vanguard, but she's ours too," her words a bridge forming. Zola stood between Reese and Lena, their hands clasped, Malcolm flanking them, the sunset bathing them in gold. Her shorn hair caught the breeze, a symbol of roots no blade could sever. The jasmine's scent curled around them, sweet and unyielding, and Zola's heart swelled, not with pain, but with possibility. The mansion behind them was no longer a cage, but a witness to her triumph, its walls echoing the truth she'd claimed. "We'll build something new," she said, her voice soft but certain, a vow to herself and her family. The stars pierced the twilight, and Zola knew with every golden thread in her hand that her roots would hold her, now and always. As Charleston's twilight fades, Zola stands unbroken, her Gullah roots a beacon of resilience, her truth a flame that reshaped a dynasty. Her journey from violation to victory echoes in the heart, a testament to heritage no blade can sever. What moved you most in her saga? Did Zola's defiance stir your soul, or did the Devington's reckoning spark hope for change? Share your thoughts below. Your voice weaves the next chapter of this tale. Thank you, dear listeners, for joining Zola's fight, for standing with her through pain and triumph. Your presence lights the way. Return soon for more stories of courage and redemption, where roots run deep and truth burns bright. Until then, hold fast and let your stories shine.